I'm going to be showing you how to make a draft stopper. It's also known as a draft snake or a draft dodger. Most of them are filled with dried beans or rice. This particular one is filled with cat litter. It's called Yesterday's News by Purina. It does have a little bit of a flowery scent to it. It holds up really nice, and you don't need that much. It's very cost effective too. It ended up being like 67 cents per pound after tax and everything. So I don't know how much I used for this particular one. I still have a whole bag filled, and you can make tons of these, and you can give them away to friends or family members that probably have drafty houses. It keeps the cold air out and the warm air in, and it's great just to as a side project or to use scraps of fabric. So I guess all you'll need if you do have scraps of fabric is to go to the market and buy the filling. So you can use dried beans, rice, or Yesterday's News. It's up to you. So first you're going to have to measure the length of the door or window where you're going to be putting the draft stopper. And I'm using a measuring tape, but you can use a yardstick or ruler if you have one long enough. And then you're going to add 1.5 inches. Now the 1/2 inch is for the ease, and then the 1 inch is for the seam allowance. Now after you got that completed, my door ends up measuring 31 inches with the 1/2 inch seam allowance. So the pattern is according to those measurements, but you can change it up however you like, as long as the final length is the length of the door plus 1.5 inches. What we're going to do right now is I'm going to show you how to make the shapes, so the center panel. So you're going to print out the templates from my website, or you can use any shape or size you want. Keep in mind you are going to be sewing these, so you want to keep the shape basic and simple and not too small, because it's going to be hard for you to sew later on. We're going to use fusible interfacing. There's a smooth side and side with glue on it. We're going to, or little dots. It's also shiny. You're going to be using that side to trace the template on. So we're going to place the template on top of the interfacing, and you're going to trace the shape onto that interfacing. Once you're done with that, you're going to place your interfacing wherever you want. Make sure that this is going to be folded in half, so you might not end up seeing the full shape, just because it's a little bit big, so when you fold it in half you're probably not going to see it. But make sure when you do this you're going to place it not too close to the edge, because when you start sewing it might get cut off if you placed it right at the edge. Try to place it somewhere in the middle, but you can place it staggered like I did, just to give it a little interesting look to it. Then what you're going to do is you're going to pin, you only need a few pins. Then what you're going to do is you're going to sew along the lines that we have just traced. And as you can see here, I've cut out the center, probably like 1/4 inch away from the stitch line inside, because we're going to be turning this over. So, and if you have, like the heart has a lot of curves, so you're going to want to snip along those curves and at the tips on the bottom and the top. Just so it makes it easier to turn over, and when you iron it, it's going to be flat and there aren't going to be any kind of wrinkles or anything. So we're going to put the fabric through and make sure you get the tip point. You can use a point turner or anything, a pencil, just anything that's not that sharp, so you don't poke a hole through your fabric. Then once that is completed, you're going to turn this over to the wrong side, and you're going to iron it. And that will keep it from turning over, and it really makes a nice clean edge on your shapes. As you can see here on my star, I've already turned it inside out and ironed the back side of this. And I sniffed the edges where they were noticeable on the top. Then I grabbed any scrap fabric. If you have a very lightweight fabric, you can put interfacing on the back just to make it a little bit more stiffer. And you place that underneath the fabric. Then you're going to stitch along the edge, securing the bottom fabric to the top. With this star, I've made a zigzag stitch along the edges. You can do whatever you want, be creative. And as you can see on my finished piece, that on the hearts, I first started to sew an 1/8 of an inch along the edge of the heart, but I found that to be a little bit dull. So what I did is I changed threads and made it into red, and I sewed a wiggly's line along the edges like 3 times around, just to give it a little bit more pop and it look a lot better. You can also do embroidery designs if your machine has fun little different stitches to them, like embroidery stitches. You can use that along the edges. Mine didn't turn out so well, but yours might if you just take the time to do it. Then to go to the other panels to complete the length of your draft stopper, I've added a contrast fabric, and what I did is I sewed right sides together 1/2 inch, then I ironed it closed, making sure the seam allowance went toward the contrast fabric on both sides, and I top stitched 1/4 of an inch. You can do an 1/8 of an inch, however, whatever you like the look to be. Once that's completed and you have the length, we're going to fold it in half and you're going to start pinning. Now, you're going to need to leave a 4-inch opening, a little bit more if you want. It's just remember that you will be hand stitching the opening and you will need to be able to turn this inside out. I put 2 pins on one side, and then 4 inches from there I put another 2 pins really close together. That indicates when I'm sewing that I need to stop at those 2 pins and then continue along the other 2 pins. It makes it a lot easier, and I don't have to think about it too much, or forget while I'm sewing and then have to rip the seams open to get this turned inside out. Now you're going to finish you're going to finish pinning these together. And then once this is completed, you're going to go to your machine and sew 1/2 inch around the edge. Keep in mind, you will need to leave the 4 inch open. You're going to turn it inside out and you're going to fill it. I've made my own funnel since I don't have one. I made it out of scraps of paper, stapled it, and put tape on it. I kept the bottom of it open enough for whatever I'm filling it with to go down and not get clogged up, and then the top big enough for a handful or a scoop of, like in a cup, to go through. This worked fine for me. You guys can use anything if you have an actual funnel that would work. And here is what I filled it with. Yesterday's news. It is cat litter. It does have a little bit of a flowery scent to it, but not overpowering. So this is what the final project is going to look like. You can see where you want to make some changes, or if you want to leave it the way it is. As I told you before, some of the shapes aren't going to be noticeable unless you put them in the center. But I like this staggered look. I hope you enjoyed this week's program, and I'll see you next time.
To make this draft stopper, you will need the following. Materials: fabric, interfacing, one of the following: yesterday's news, dried beans, rice. Tools: sewing machine, iron, measuring tape or ruler, tailor's chalk, scissors, straight pins, needles and thread,